Hey there, friend. Welcome to Create Conversations. This podcast is designed to connect you with entrepreneurs and creatives from across the country and sometimes around the world. When I was first starting my business, I really didn't have that sense of community to connect with, to bounce ideas off of, to really know that I'm going the right direction or was doing something right. That's why I created this podcast, to give you that community in hopes that it can inspire you and drive you forward through your entrepreneurial journey. So without further ado, let's create some conversations. Hey there, friends. It's Vanessa. Welcome back to the Create Conversations podcast. I'm here with my friend Katie. We met at Creative at Heart. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Well, first, Vanessa, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Katie McCoy. For those of you who do not know me, I had the pleasure of meeting Vanessa at Creative at Heart, which was such a wonderful experience. I have been living in Bermuda for the past year, and I'm moving on to head to Europe next year. But in terms of what I do, I found a passion in helping women, specifically women entrepreneurs, just address their fears, face their fears, manage stress, anxiety, and really finding tangible ways that you can use that every single day. And I do that through some really interesting techniques that we're going to talk about today. A little bit of hypnotherapy, EFT, which is also known as tapping, time techniques, and eventually neuro-linguistic programming, which is also known as NLP. So there's a lot of really wonderful tools out there that we can all use to really overcome the everyday struggles that we all have, which we all have stress, we all have fear, and we all have a little bit of anxiety from time to time.
Yeah, all things that I certainly struggle with. So let's start off with what is fear and why do we experience it?
It's a big topic, isn't
A
it?
loaded question as well.
Yes, yeah, very loaded. So I think the first thing to understand about fear is that it's a feeling. I think a lot of times fear is this monster in the room that we never address. But once we realize that it is a feeling and every human on the planet experiences it, it becomes a little less daunting. And, in terms of why we experience it as humans, we're actually meant to experience fear as a mechanism to help us survive. Which is funny because if you think about the fear that we experience today, a lot of it is exaggerated or, provoked by something pretty insignificant. So what it's meant for and what we're meant to experience it for versus what we actually experience today in our everyday lives is a lot different. But some of those fears that we experience are the fear of being left out, fear of not getting a job, of just not being accepted in a group, in a new setting, not being loved, or even recently, I've learned that there's a fear of not making it on Instagram,
It's true.
which is a funny thing to worry about when you think about the reason that we have fear, because none of those things will threaten our survival. None of those things that I listed will actually threaten who we are. It could affect our lifestyle, of course. But the thing is, in all of those situations, especially the fear of not making it on Instagram, we still have the ability to be in control, which is a really cool thing when you think about some of the biggest fears that we have right now, but also realizing that you can still be in control of those. So in terms of what fear is, it's a feeling, it's a sensation. And, we experience it for lots of different reasons. But I think the main reason that we experience fear today in today's society is the unknown. It can simply just be fear of what we do not know, or fear of things that are so insignificant in the big scheme of things, but to us, they seem really big right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm
Oh,
trying to explain that in the best way.
that totally does. Like, I mean, there was something when we were at Creative at Heart, kind of the opening speaker was Kat, and she was talking about kind of the highs and lows of being an entrepreneur and how you can be on your biggest game one day and then the next minute you're like in total fear and total like I can't do this. I like everything's awful, nothing's gonna work. So this like it totally makes sense. Like it's simple, like, yeah, it's a feeling, but kind of acknowledging that, like, yes, it's a feeling. Everyone has it. Every entrepreneur has it. Like, we're all just trying to figure this out.
Yes. You're absolutely right. We're all just trying to figure it out. And what I think is interesting about what you said about Kat at Creative at Heart and kind of demonstrating that in the first speech or the opening notes, I think it's something powerful happens when we as people and as humans realize that we're not alone and that there's other people in that same boat. I remember when I was 22 and I first started in entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
I remember feeling like nobody understood what I was going through, or that just nobody, even if there were other entrepreneurs that might have had struggles,
Mhm.
that I couldn't connect with them because they had already passed. And there was like some secret gate that I didn't have a key to yet.
Right. But in
And
reality, they've been where you are, so they are most likely to understand. Whereas like I definitely felt that feeling. Whereas like I would say definitely everyone I've met at Creative at Heart and entrepreneurs I've met are definitely some of my closest friends just because
Mhm.
like I have other friends outside of the entrepreneurial world, but they don't understand like staying up late to get things done.
Yeah.
They don't understand the not 9 to 5. Like they don't get that, so they don't get my struggle. So
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I have noticed since I've been an entrepreneur, I tend to gravitate towards
yeah,
entrepreneurs, right? I mean, I think there's a natural fit there, but yeah, it's really interesting, kind of taking it back to fear. I think the reason that we connect as entrepreneurs is because we share a lot of the same fears. And recently, honestly, within the last year, one of those fears that I realized was not necessarily not making money, but simply just not being good enough.
yeah,
I mean, there's always that financial piece for every entrepreneur, of course, but what prevents people from not making money? If you don't have the confidence to feel that you're worthy of that,
hmm
then it's a really interesting sort of thing that then plays into fear as well. So it's we all share those similar feelings and those similar fears and experiences, and it's really lovely to have places like Creative at Heart that allow us to you know connect together and share that and be open and honest. I mean, what a gift, right?
right, right. Do you feel like we are more fearful today in this world than we used to be? I feel like the obvious answer is yes, but like I'm interested on what like your opinion is and like why.
I have been thinking about this for a while, and I have to tell you, I've gone back and forth. But to me, the answer that I think is that we're not necessarily more fearful,
hmm
but the fears we have are different.
Yeah.
So there's obvious aspects that contribute to this heightened sense of fear. The internet, social media, and then there's fake news and information spread across those channels. But in addition to, what isn't real, there's also some very real things that are happening, specifically in our world that how could you not be fearful? Those are some questions that you ask. And I actually was listening to a podcast today that was on fear. It's been a very fear themed day for me in the office. And one thing that was brought up on that podcast was about the recent shootings in Texas and Ohio, which is devastating. And they had mentioned that, maybe you're scared to go out and run your errands the next day, or maybe you're scared to go out to the movies. And that's an understandable fear completely. But I think what we all need to remember is that as a society, we do have free will.
Yeah.
There's nobody in this world in charge of you but you. And there's nobody in this world in charge of me but me. And I think that you have a choice when these things happen. And it's our responsibility to make a radical, no nonsense decision that we won't stand for those things in our world, but also that we are going to be the change that we want to see in terms of, because I don't want to have fearful children.
Right.
I would be a fearful parent. I don't want to have fearful clients, so I won't be a fearful photographer, especially in your case.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to radiate confidence when you're with a client. And those are the choices that we make in our everyday lives. And they're small choices, but they add up to big things.
Right.
So some people could say that we're more fearful. I think that the fears are different, and we now have a responsibility as individuals, not necessarily as any specific group of people, but just individuals, to say, this does scare me, and I'm not going to allow it to scare me, because I'm not going to allow it in my world. That's our responsibility. That's our job. On a lighter note, I think that another fear that I would say I know that is hugely present in a lot of my friends, and specifically in the entrepreneurship world, is, what will people think of me?
Yep.
And I'm not going to say that no one before us experienced that fear, because I think that would just be untrue.
Right.
But I think that today we experience that because of apps like Instagram and the general sort of concept of highlight reeling or Pinterest perfecting our lives. To me, that's created somewhat of an epidemic. So are we more fearful? Not necessarily, but there's things that are insignificant that make us fearful.
Yeah. Because I mean, like, if you think about it, like how you said, like, the fears are different nowadays, like, in the sense of an entrepreneur, how we think, like, we're afraid of what people will think of us. Like, if you think back, like, let's go back to colonial times where everyone had their own business. Like, that was just a thing.
Yeah, that was how you made your money.
Right. So if you think of that, it's like, well, you're just making money in a different way than everyone else. It's like,
yeah.
Really, it shouldn't be a fear. And do you feel that there are ways, like, people tend to imagine scenarios, like I always imagine scenarios and fearful scenarios of, like, trying to, because I'm an Enneagram 8, so I'll always prepare for, like, everything.
So almost like a what if type of a situation.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's a lot of that nowadays, or do you feel like that's a part of our fears? That is like those what if scenarios.
Yes. I think we're living in a time where people were raised to worry.
Yeah.
Think about, we grew up with our parents consistently warning us. Think about something I'm trying to think of: wear a hat or you'll catch a cold, or don't try that, you'll poke your eyes out.
Or
Think
like
about those. Small things.
don't eat right before you get in the swimming pool because you're gonna get
Yes.
sick. Like,
Yes. All those simple little innocent warnings,
mhm,
right? Those caution signs. Um, they're innocent and they're well intended, but what happened was it created this constant fear-based worry, right? In all of us. And so to your what if scenario, those innocent story tales or wives' tales that we heard when we were little,
mhm,
that can turn into and come out in anxiety in adults. It can come out in the form of stress, in the form of what if worrying. So, in terms of, imagining scenarios where we felt fearful or creating scenarios, rather, essentially what you're doing is telling yourself stories.
yeah,
I don't know if you've heard of Brene Brown. I'm sure, hopefully, you've heard of Brene Brown.
it sounds familiar. Yeah,
Yes. So Brene Brown is a wonderful researcher. And one of the things that she talks about, in addition to her main research, which is shame, vulnerability and all of that goes with it. But one of her main sort of, I guess, pillars that she talks about is telling stories to ourselves. So, what if worries is sort of a way of telling stories for yourself. So, you're going to put out a new product and you're thinking in your head, this is such an awesome product. I've got this, and this. But then you make up a million and one what ifs. What if this goes wrong? What if this person doesn't buy it? What if this person doesn't like it? And suddenly you have riddled yourself with fear over something that hasn't even happened. But the truth is, we all do it in some capacity.
yeah,
Um, so, in terms of, imagining those scenarios, I think that there is a reason that we have that, but that the reason that we feel that today wasn't necessarily ill intended. It came from the best intentions, but there's a balance in everything.
yeah,
You can always worry too much, but could you worry too little? That's a question. I think that if we weren't fearful, we wouldn't be wise,
yeah,
in a lot of scenarios as well. Sometimes that little pit of your stomach, which we often call the intuition,
mhm,
to not take that left turn or not take that back way, that is your survival mechanism speaking to you. And so there's a million different things in imagining scenarios, but there's also fear that we can't realize because of what happened when we were a child or because of what we were told when we were a child. Those become subconscious beliefs.
yeah. And you think those are things that like you may not even realize that you're like there could be something I tell a friend that's like, oh, don't do this, and they may have never heard that ever before, but they're like, well, why do you say that? And you're like, I don't
I
know.
don't know. I don't even know why I said it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So a good example of that is, I learned this in a class about a year ago, and it's still one of my favorite examples. So if you were young and imagine your brain is a sponge, right? You're soaking up everything around you. What actually happens is that at age 7, your subconscious stops forming.
Really?
So, yes. So essentially, everything that you learned prior to age 7, first of all, you couldn't necessarily understand everything that you were learning. So you were taking everything at face value, exactly what it is. So if you were spent your early childhood listening to your parents fight about money or finance,
Mhm.
what would happen is you can't put together all the fine details and add context to that situation. So essentially, your subconscious simply believes that money equals fighting equals bad.
Yeah.
So then in adulthood, you might have like a troubled, terrible relationship with finance and money. Like you just don't even want to look at numbers, you hate them, but
Mhm.
you don't even know why. Like you're like, oh, my parents fought about money, but that has nothing to do with me. So that is a really good example of something that you might not even know um, or understand. But the best way that you can sort of identify those things is just by asking yourself questions.
Mhm.
So, and it doesn't necessarily need to be money. So, it could be health, exercise goals, relationships, career, gosh, the way you maintain your home, the way you parent. And if you do have hidden fears or you do feel a place in your life where you're being held back, you
Mhm.
can simply just start asking yourself questions and listening. And then you might say, oh my gosh, I remember my grandma telling me this one thing about health and exercise, and it stopped me ever since, you know? And the thing is, once you realize it, it all becomes so simple. It really does. But it's a big challenge. We're climbing up a mountain that we don't realize that we're climbing.
Mhm.
So wouldn't that be challenging?
Right, right. Do you think they're just like out of curiosity, do you think or do you think of questions that people could if people are very don't aren't aware of their fears or
Mhm.
aren't aware of things that there's definitely things that I've done that people have pointed out to me and then I'm like, "Oh, I do that?" And like after a while I think about it. Are there anything that you think people should look out for or things that either trouble them consistently to then be like maybe I should ask myself some questions, like what do you think is like a good here's where you should start.
Yeah. Where to start? So I think the simplest way on where to start is just how am I feeling? And just start asking yourself that every day. I think I remember a time in my life before I discovered this work. And I always say that through the work, I discovered myself. And that is 100% true.
Yeah.
Um, it it's been such a magical experience for me, and I've been so blessed to have it for this time that if I really look back at it, what all started it for me was a comment by a friend and a book that I read.
Mhm.
So, without getting too much into a story, I just want to reiterate that something simple, it doesn't need to be some grand gesture.
Mhm.
It can simply be I'm going to spend the rest of this month asking myself how I feel every single day. And then if I realize that I'm feeling sad one day, or I'm realizing that I can't seem to get a grip on this one thing at work,
Mhm.
then I'm going to ask myself why. Why do I feel sad? Why can't I pick up this task? Or, even why do I do that thing that I never realize I do, but everyone says that I do?
Right.
So
Yeah.
um, I think as in terms of some guidelines, first and foremost, never think that there's something wrong with you for having a fear or subconsciously holding on to something. That's the first thing. Accept who you are, love yourself for it, and just say, I'm going to let go of this part of myself, or I'm going to let go of this fear that's holding me back. And that's the first step. So I'm going to let go. I'm going to let go and let be. But then I'm going to ask myself, and I'm going to be kind when I'm asking myself, and I'm going to be kind when I receive my answers.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, Answers might surprise you sometimes. They've definitely surprised me in a few journaling sessions or meditation sessions. There was one journaling session where I was writing and I wrote the words on the page. And after I read them back, I couldn't believe that that was what I had written. I mean, I was just in shock. So be prepared for those surprises, but just be kind to yourself. So, um, don't blame yourself. Ask yourself questions. Don't worry about what you ask. Just keep it simple.
Mhm. So I've just been always curious about journaling, and and obviously it helps people that they can just write down their thoughts. Like,
Journaling
is there a way to approach that, like, in the sense of fear? Because it could be literally
in
anything.
the sense of fear.
Like, do you, like, is there a way for just, like, if you say, like, you ask yourself how you're doing and then just write down how you're doing, and then over time, like, you'll get to
Yeah,
where you're just like, I don't feel good, or this is
I
what I
don't
feel.
feel this way. Well, there's a few things. So I am a super fan of journaling. I have to say, I think some of the best realizations and the best work comes out of journaling because that's a time for yourself,
Mm,
right? Just you and your thoughts, and that's amazing. So in terms of guidelines, I'm going to change what I said before and modify it a little bit. So hopefully everyone listening, you could follow this starting right now today and, take and carry that with you. So I would just encourage you to grab a blank notebook. If you are anyone that went to Creative at Heart, I know you have at least three
yeah.
that are probably blank. Um, it doesn't need to be anything fancy, but so grab a notebook and decide that you're going to set your alarm for 30 minutes earlier. 30 minutes earlier, and call it a date with yourself. That's what I like to kind of frame these things at, because if we tell ourselves that we're going to get up 30 minutes early to journal about our feelings, I mean, come on, who would want to actually do that? I know I wouldn't, right? So you're going to wake up for a coffee date with yourself and take that blank notebook and just start writing, how do I feel today? Write the date and write how you feel. You might feel like writing one page, you might feel like writing 3 pages. Just keep it simple. How do you feel? And I would say once you've completed that notebook, I would say most notebooks are 30 to like 60-ish pages, right? So a 30 to 60-day routine, 1 to 2 months. After that, a really, really good step to take would be to read that back to yourself and see your progress, because as you continue to check in and as you continue to face some of those things, specifically with fear, you might feel led, instead of just saying, how am I feeling today? What am I fearing today?
Yeah.
And by simply writing those feelings and fears down, what you've done is you've pulled them out of your head
Mm,
and you've put them into open space. And as soon as you put fear, take it out of your head and put it somewhere else, that is the first step to overcoming it and defeating it. It really is, because as we talked about, kind of sometimes entrepreneurship can be lonely. If you're alone and you're swirling around with all of those thoughts of fear and worry and stress in your head, I mean, how are you going to feel? You're going to feel awful. You have no one to talk to. There's nowhere for those thoughts to go.
mhm.
So, one of my favorite terms in college was brain dump. They would always tell us to brain dump our ideas. And so, just as similar, do a brain dump on your feelings and your fears. Get them out there, stick with the practice, and, be kind to yourself
Yeah.
throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Did that answer maybe a
Yeah.
way
No,
to
yeah,
journal? Was that
you
helpful?
totally answered it. Now I'm like more motivated to actually try it, because I have friends that do journal, and believe me, I've like bought every journal, like the most adorable journal I found, and been like, okay, I'm gonna do this. It's cute. I have a cute pen.
Yes.
I have a cute journal. It's gonna work, and it never really works. So I think putting a mindset on like, okay, this is a date with myself, and to really check in with myself, that I think will motivate me a lot more, and like maybe making myself some tea or some coffee or whatever to like make it like a routine.
Yes. I thank you for saying tea or coffee or, whatever treat makes you feel good, because the thing about facing our feelings is we're never going to want to do it. I mean, think about even confrontation. I think as women, we just avoid confrontation at all costs. I think that's very characteristic of a lot of my friends and the people that I get to work with. And there's nothing worse than sitting with your feelings for the first time when you haven't done it before. I can tell you that it's painful. But if you can remember that there may be pain, but you're ultimately doing something for yourself and for the benefit of your future self,
Yeah.
how could you not want that for your future? When I think about that and I just frame it in that way, and if I don't want to do something, or I know that I need to do a gratitude practice or a tapping session, and I don't want to, I will just tell myself, will I thank myself tomorrow if I do it? And you're never going to regret taking care of your mental and emotional health. So I love the idea of just getting a treat, have something to look forward to in the morning, whether it's an iced coffee or a latte or a smoothie, whatever that is. Set yourself up for success by giving yourself a reward to look forward to. I think that's a great method because uh, getting started won't be fun, but pretty notebooks and great lattes can definitely help, I can imagine, and I'm sure.
Yeah. So we kind of talked about like one way of getting comfortable with your feelings and
Mm.
comfortable with fear. Like, what are other ways that we can get comfortable with fear and ultimately overcome it?
So many ways. So the first thing to remember is you have to face it and you have to address it. So unless you call out what you're feeling, there will be no way to get comfortable with it.
Mhm.
Um, I think that we've all heard the term more and more, get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Um, that is something that you're going to have to get comfortable with, because drawing out your fears, especially if it's something that you haven't really done before, or maybe you've never really considered yourself a fearful person, but you worry a lot. Any of those things could really go hand in hand. But um, I think that when you're doing that, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and just sitting in that discomfort is the first step. Now, if it's okay with you, I actually learned about something this week that I would like to share. There is a wonderful motivational speaker. Her name is Mel Robbins. I just recently discovered her, but I've had a book of hers in my bookshelf, on my bookshelf, for almost a year now, and it's called the 5 Second Rule. And I finally got to reading it this week, and I have to tell you, it was so timely because the 5 second rule is, you know, just about overcoming how you feel and getting done what you need to get done, if I had to really boil it down. And the one thing that I know to be true about myself is a lot of times I will know what I need to do. So we might know that we need to sit with our fears and journal and get uncomfortable, but I don't want to do it, or there's sometimes where you know what you need to do, but you just kind of keep putting it off. So, a really good way to kick yourself into gear with that is Mel's 5 second rule.
Mhm.
And it's so simple, it's five, four, three, two, one, go. If you can count to five, you can master this rule. And what she talks about is not only motivating yourself to get to the gym and eat healthy and get out of bed in the morning, but also helping free up your mind and take those toxic thoughts away.
Mhm.
So she uses this method of counting down from five, five, four, three, two, one, go. And she applies it to things like fear. So sort of, I guess, I don't know if we're on number two or number three here, but wrap up with the concept of sitting with it. If you're having trouble getting to that journal or calling out your fears, five, four, three, two, one, go, you're able to talk yourself down from the worry, the anxiety. You're
Mm.
able to focus on why you need to be doing this to overcome those fears. And then once you hit go, you're ready to go. You get up, you physically move, and you do it. And I love that rule, because one of the things that is most common, that I get a lot of is, I know I need to journal. I know I need to do these things, but I just can't do it.
Yeah.
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it's so simple. It couldn't get any more simple than that. But sort of a way to control your mind when it starts to get out of control. If you can count to 5, you can control your mind. So that is another tip that I would give. And the last one is something that is essentially referred to as anchor thoughts. So Mel also talks about this, but she explains it slightly different to what I know. So if you need to face something that's fearful, so this would be when you're actually in the act, it's happening, you're public speaking, you need to go up and introduce yourself to that person, whatever it is, you know that you just need to get on to the other side of that, right?
Right.
So if I am feeling fearful about public speaking, just like I was slightly nervous before this interview, I said, hey, I'm going to hop off. I'm just going to meditate really quick. So during that meditation for me, I decided that I was just going to envision the interview going really well. I was going to envision it reaching your audience members and touching them in the way that they need to be touched, in the way that they need to be served. And the same way for public speaking, if you're giving a speech, you imagine yourself giving a speech, you imagine yourself uh, having it go well. Maybe you even imagine yourself getting clients after the speech, that because they met you. So anchor yourself in the positive thought. um, this doesn't necessarily mean that you should be positive all the time and never be negative. Don't be construed with that. But if you're feeling fearful, anchor yourself in the positive and know what's to come on the other side. Mel in her book uses it as an example with plane crashes. So, or fear of flying, rather, fear of the plane crashing. So, if that is something that you're fearful of, imagine yourself getting to your destination, enjoying your trip. You're already there, you're with your family. And I loved that example that she used, because I think it's such an example that we can all relate to. I think we've all been on a flight where we've had a little heart flutter or a heart jump or
Yeah.
something of that case. Or maybe you've never even been on a plane because you're fearful of that. So I love the way that she uses that rule. But anchor yourself in the thought of what you know is to come after it. Not exactly the most eloquently said, but I hope that gets the point across. And I know we talked about potentially one more way to sort of overcome it. And if it's okay, we can do the meditation. We can talk about our fears right now, or if you would want to reserve that a little bit later, would we want to go ahead with the meditation now?
Oh, for sure. Definitely.
Okay. I'm just going to get situated, if that's okay.
That's totally fine.
So before we get started, I have to say, if you are driving or operating any machinery of any kind, maybe you should pause and come back to this meditation when you're in a safe space, you're not driving, you're in your home, you're relaxing. But if you do wish to listen along with us, that's perfectly okay. Just keep your eyes open, stay alert, and practice safe listening habits.
Yes.
Don't close your eyes, essentially. So, Vanessa, we've talked a lot about fear today. I have been thinking about fear so much. And when I think about fear and I think about how all of us experience fear, the one thing I know to be true is everyone experiences it in their own way.
Mhm.
Um, when you are feeling fear or the feeling of worry or anxiety or stress creeps in, you have some ways that you can stop that. And you can always remember that you're in control. Fear is so scary sometimes. And when you feel scared, or when you feel that you're not in control, or you feel your mind taking over, I encourage you to use those tools and use this meditation, utilize this meditation for your own benefit. So without further ado, we're going to get started. Just one more reminder, if you are driving, feel free to go ahead and pull off to the side of the road, or if you wish to continue driving, just don't follow along with us. Just go ahead and pay attention to the road and maybe even shut this off for now. So the first thing I want you to do is just take a deep breath. You can go ahead and put your hand on your stomach. Breathe in. Let your belly fill with air. Hold your breath at the top. Keep holding. And just give one big exhale when you're ready. And we'll go again for another breath. Just breathe in. Breathe in everything around you. Breathe in all the good that you want to come in your life. Breathe it in. Let your belly expand and hold it at the top. Keep holding. And big exhale. And when you exhale, I want you to feel any negative feeling, any feeling of fear, to just simply leave your body. Allow anything that doesn't serve you anymore to leave. And if there's anything left, what we're going to do is simply sit with the fear in this meditation. The fear that you are feeling now may not even be your own. It may be fear that's been passed on to you by someone else, or it may be fear that's come to you as a result of something that's happened. Your fear may be simple, or it may be complex, but whatever that fear is, I just want you to sit with it. Envision yourself walking up to your fear, looking at it, seeing it. What does that fear look like? What is that fear? Take a moment to call out your fear. Call it out loud to yourself. Don't be afraid if the words that come out are not what you expected. Fear, just like any emotion, can be surprising, and that's okay. Are you sitting with your fear? If you're sitting with your fear, I want you to look and simply ask, why are you here? Ask your fear, why? You may not like the answer that you get. The answer may surprise you. But whatever the answer is, I simply want you to sit with it. We're sitting with our fear, and we're sitting with the why, the reason why we have the fear. What's left? Anything else that you might be feeling? Any other emotion that comes with this fear? I want you to let it rush over your body and leave through your feet, through your toes, through your hands, through your fingers. Allow any feeling of fear that is left to just release. Take a deep breath in. Hold at the top and release. Take another deep breath in, and as you're taking this deep breath in, I want you to imagine all of the reasons that you have the fear that you're facing. I want you to envision you standing up to each and every reason and telling it to go away. It's not welcome here. There's no reason that you should hold on to fears that are insignificant. Fear is simply an emotion. It's a sensation that will go away. Take one big, deep breath. Breathe in. I want you to breathe in all of the good, all of the positive energy around you. Breathe in deep. Hold at the top and release. As you're releasing, make sure that anything that's left, any bit of fear, any anxiety, any stress, leaves your body. The fears that come to us are often unexpected. They can be scary. They can be hurtful. But the fact remains that unless we sit with these fears, unless we pull them out of our minds and get them out into the open, unless we talk about them, unless we talk to them, they will not be resolved. You have the power to change any fear, to let go of any fear, to defeat any fear that you're holding on to. Fear does not control you. You are in control. Let go of the fear. Let go of any feelings of negativity, of stress, of anxiety. And once you're ready, you can simply open your eyes. Hopefully you are feeling a little lighter. Hopefully you're feeling less anxious. Hopefully you're feeling hope, and you know that you have the tools that you need to overcome whatever you're battling, whatever you're facing, any fear that comes up, whether it's small or big. You're empowered and you're ready to handle whatever comes your way. You are in control.
That was amazing. Because I was following along, obviously, and I felt that was absolutely incredible. And I feel so much lighter. I feel so much better. It feels good.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, that makes me so happy. I think this was such a fun topic that I think I could talk for hours on. I don't know who I am when I start saying that fear is a fun topic that I could talk about for a long time. But, I think anything with fear is any emotion really, or any experience, any human experience, once you realize that every person on this planet, all 7 billion of us, we're all human, and we are all fundamentally the same. We have the same organs and the same body composition in terms of what happens and how it all works, and we experience the same emotions. Once you realize that, and you can come to terms with the fact that you're not alone, you can really gain the courage to do anything. And sometimes courage is small, And sometimes courage is really, really big. And I hope that if any tidbit comes from this episode, anyone listening can just know that there is no reason to fear anything, because we can thrive. We are meant to thrive. We're brought to this earth with unique desires, with the intention for us to thrive, which is amazing. We're all unique in our own way. And if we can just push through those small, everyday things that are scary, those will really add up, and those will translate into courage. And whether it's journaling or the 5-4-3-2-1 method by Mel Robbins, the 5-second rule, or it's just simply remembering that vulnerability is courage. If you're a Brene Brown fan, whatever suits you, whatever works for you, just keep that in mind. I hope that everyone listening will keep that in mind.
Yeah. And I mean, for an entrepreneur, you're already accomplishing one fear. You're totally saying no to the 9-to-5. You're jumping into something of the unknown. So you're already accomplishing a big fear and have a big courage to do that.
That is such a good point. I mean, the first step to say, I'm not going to take the regular path, I'm going to take this path, that takes a lot of courage. Yeah. I mean, thinking back on when I quit my job, wow. I mean, palms sweating, armpits sweating, everything sweating, crying a little bit, if I remember correctly. I was an emotional wreck because, and I'm sure I'm not alone. I don't know about your decision, but it is a scary thing. So if you are an entrepreneur, or if you're considering entrepreneurship, I think give yourself a lot of credit for taking that first step, because it is not an easy one.
No, it's certainly not. So I know we kind of touched on why it's important for entrepreneurs to address and overcome fears, but what are any final notes that you have on that?
I could have a lot of final notes, but I'm going to try to condense it.
Okay.
I can be a real chatty Kathy, as I'm sure you can tell. So I think that as an entrepreneur, the reason it's important to continuously work on yourself and continuously overcome your fears is that there is no one that's going to come save the day but you.
Yeah.
And when you take a radical responsibility, not only for your personal happiness in terms of being an entrepreneur, I mean, that is, I think most people go into entrepreneurship for a personal reason of some form, right? There's a reason that's personal, that we chose not to follow the 9-to-5 path. But I think when you make that decision, you have a responsibility to keep making that decision. And as you grow in life and in your career as an entrepreneur, even if you're not an entrepreneur, those fears are going to change and they're going to evolve. Mm-hmm. And the bigger your career gets, the bigger the obstacles get.
Right.
So we can't just decide that we're going to overcome this set of fears, but not this set of fears. Mm-hmm. So I think in terms of the importance of it, just think about yourself. You know, do you love yourself? Do you want yourself to thrive? Do you care about yourself? I hope everyone listening does, and I think they do. So if you are wondering the reason why it's important, I guess I would ask, is it important to you that you evolve the same way that your business evolves? Is that important? And I think that is personally. I think you would agree.
Yes.
So in terms of, importance, there's nothing more important than that. The businesses will fade. Even at Creative at Heart, we saw several businesses coming to close and new chapters opening.
Right.
And these weren't just a couple year businesses. These were 12, I think even one like 15 years, I heard.
Yeah.
That is a very long time. That's a season. That's a chapter of life that's coming to a close. And when we can see that those things close, the one thing that you're going to have at the end is yourself. So if you're thinking about why it's important for you as an entrepreneur to overcome your fears, I think you should be asking yourself maybe something along the lines of, if I don't overcome my personal fears, how can I achieve the level that I want to be as an entrepreneur?
Right, exactly. Well, I want to
food for thought.
Yeah,
very serious.
Food for thought. But I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Katie. It has been such a joy. Where can people find you? Because I know you have come back on Instagram, and I watch every single story you have, because I'm just like, I want to know more. I want to know all the things. So
that's exciting. So a lot of exciting things happening. Thank you for mentioning, because I would have forgotten to tell people where to find me. So on Instagram, you can find me. I actually have to look up my handle. This is
it's
just a second. I might be the first and last ever. I am Kate & Co. on Instagram. You can find me there. I'm getting back. I'm getting better at it. I'm going to be talking about fear and anxiety and stress and how to manage it all. I just want to, in a similar way to the way that you're creating conversations on this podcast. Love that name. That's just so fitting. I want to create conversations about the things that we don't talk about, and the things that we really should, because I think the reality is that we're living in a world where a lot of people are hurting and a lot of people are suffering. Not just physically in terms of health, but also in mental health. And the thing about mental health is you're quiet about it. You don't share it, and it doesn't show. And if you do decide to check out my Instagram, I hope that you'll find a few tips and a few things that are helpful. We're all in this together. And if you're listening and you're feeling alone, I would actually invite you to maybe check out Kate & Co. on Instagram. I hope to build a really wonderful community there, and I just hope that I even help one person.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
That's so awesome. Well, thank you all for listening to today's episode, and until next time, bye guys. Thank you so much for watching and listening to today's podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you leave a review, because that really helps us grow the show. If you want to continue to support this podcast, head over to our Patreon from the link in the description or the link in the show notes, where you can sign up for one of 3 tiers where you get exclusive merch, a direct line to me to tell me who I should have on the show, as well as getting to hear and see the podcast days before it releases to the public. I'm so excited for all the other exciting things that I'm going to be sharing with my patrons, and I can't wait to see you there. This podcast is also sponsored by HoneyBook. HoneyBook is an amazing client management service that I've been using for years, and they are absolutely incredible. They are so incredible that they're giving you guys an exclusive deal for 50% off your first year with them. That is a $200 savings, which is so crazy and so amazing. So you guys should head over to the link in the description or the link in the show notes to grab that amazing deal. This podcast is edited and produced by Earbrads. You can find them at Earbrads on Instagram or at earbrads.com. You can find me at Vanessa Jordan Photo on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest, and you can also find me on my YouTube channel, Vanessa Jordan Photography, if you are listening to the podcast version and not watching the YouTube version of this podcast. And you can also find me at vanessajordanphotograph.com. And until next time, I cannot wait to create some amazing conversations with you.